Have you got a story to share? A moment, an experience, something that happened that you believe that can help someone else? Well, my name's Jay from Journey of a Whitefeather, and I run a show live on Spotify and YouTube called A Chat with Jay. A chat with normal everyday people who have experienced heartache, joy, and love in their life, and they want to share it with you because they believe that their experiences can help someone out there. Become a guest, remove your mask, and tell your story, and always be the best there is, the best there was, and the best there ever will be.
Absolutely. Look, I've written, obviously, the Teacher's Manual for Ace Phys Ed, the sports games that I wrote. That was a totally different book that I put together. But this one here, I guess I had the idea. I knew what I was doing. And we went through it. I think the big thing that people ask me goes, okay, the process, obviously the costs, you can mention your costs. But I think what people want to know is we're looking at front covers, blurbs, forwards. If you were going to suggest to someone writing a book, let's just do a general, let's just say a general outlay. It could be anything, poetry, fiction, whatever it may be. Yeah. Is there a general outlay you go, right, you've got this idea and you've actually written it? What would be the process in that way? If they've already written the book, say for example, they've already written it, but it hasn't been edited yet, it's raw. Like I've got one raw right here. So I'm going, right, if I came to you, I got this, what would you be telling someone?
All right, so it depends on the writer because raw for one person might be totally different to raw to someone else. What we do at Busybird often is we recommend to people get a manuscript assessment. So that's like a book report of whatever they've written, and the book report will cover the structure of whatever they've done, the plot or the content if it's nonfiction. It'll look at their writing skills, the grammar, the punctuation, the spelling, all that sort of stuff. If it's a fiction novel, it'll look at the characters and examine how well they work. It'll look at the market. So like I said, it's an exhaustive book report of the actual manuscript. And for us, in terms of the way we work, is if people go ahead with us, then the fee of that is ultimately waived against them going ahead with us. But it just gives people at the ground level an understanding of how their content is working and how it's not working. And it also just helps them identify probably things they had ideas about but weren't quite firm about why it wasn't working the way they thought it might be working. A lot of times, and I've experienced this myself when I was younger, a lot of times people sit down to write and they have no idea what they're going to write. They have the vaguest, notion, but then they just write, and it's like they're finding their way as they go. And it's like I started writing this story that was a horror, but it's turned into a crime novel or whatever. And they're working it out as they go. So sometimes like a manuscript assessment can actually also challenge people to say, okay, what do you think your story's about? Because if you think it's about this, it seems to be actually about that. And just when the author gets a clearer definition of like, oh yeah, I am actually writing that. Or if it's like, I'm trying to do this, and it's like, you're not quite reaching that. It's helping them just focus and helping them determine, okay, I've got the manuscript down now. I now know how to move forward with it and to strengthen it and so it works to what my vision is. I always say like the best thing about writing is when you have text on the page, you have something to work with. You have nothing to work with and it's just an idea in your head. So a lot of times with writers say, just go write. If you are really unclear, just go write. And as you write, you're going to find your way. I always compare it to, if I told you, hey, you need to drive to Wollongong or something. You'll jump in the car, you'll drive, you'll follow street signs, you might get lost several times, but ultimately you're going to find your way there. It might not have been the best way there. You might have gotten lost quite a few times, had to stop, ask the directions, had to, find the right street signs and all that. But you'll find your way there ultimately. And once you found your way there, you now have a blueprint on how to do it. And then you have a way to work it better. But if it's just a concept in your head, it's like, well, it's not something that's practical because it is just still shapeless in your imagination. So a lot of times I just say to people, just write, and then we'll have something to work with. You'll have something to work with, and you'll find out stuff. I mean, I'm sure you found out with your own writing. There's probably times you're writing, and as you're writing, you're going, oh, I didn't realize this is going to do this. I didn't realize this is going to.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. So a lot of times it's self-discovery too, but you need to be in the practice of actually writing to do that. If you're just sitting around, at your job or, just sitting at home on the couch watching television, you could be daydreaming that, but that's not going to be as stimulating as actually writing on the page.
Fantastic. Well, see, this is what people have to understand when they do start. It's a really good analogy to go through. Now, people have asked me that you've got your manuscript, you've got your editor. We're talking about copyrights and trademarks and pictures, which you can go through with you when you go
Yep.
through it. Let's look at let's look at quickly. We've done the process. You put it into yourselves. You excuse me. You put the book in there, and you put it into a set way that you think it will fit. And then you go to your front covers. So you got your front cover.
Yeah,
So
with that, yeah, sorry, but just with that aspect of like once the editing's done, or if the authors had their own editing in there, like let's go straight to a design process. What we do is we ask the author, okay, how do you think do you have an idea about what the cover should be, and do you have an idea about internally how it should look?
I'd like to take this time to shout out our supporters at Liberty Bullion, the best gold, silver, and platinum traders in Melbourne, even Australia. If you want to give them a call, their knowledge, their customer service is second to none. Back to the show.
And if you have like books that you like, take some pictures, take some screenshots, send them to us, and we can use that as a template. But what we ultimately do is, whether it's the cover or the layout inside the book, we will base that on whatever the author's told us. If the author just says, go do whatever you want to do, we will base it on what we think it should look like. But then it will be sent back to the author and it'll be, okay, this is what we think it could look like. And then the author's then free to give us feedback and say, okay, oh, I love it, keep going, or I don't quite like that font, or I don't like those margins, or the cover, I don't quite like that picture. How about we try this? And then we will incorporate their feedback, or they might just come back and say, totally don't like that at all. Let's do something completely different. And again, we'll do that. It's a collaborative process. At no point with us do we say, hey, this is it, take it or leave it. As I said before, we want you to be happy at the end of the process. We want you to be 100% happy. I've had the experience myself years ago of holding up a book I wasn't 100% happy with. I don't want people going through that. So it's a collaboration back and forth. And, you would have experienced that with Kev as he was doing your layout. At the end of it, like, you're the one we have to please 100%, not us. So we take the author's input at all time and we tailor the book around that, the cover around that. Now, if the author has some really wacky ideas and says, hey, how about we use this bizarre font? We will come back and say, look, we can do that. These are the reasons we feel it might not work as well. And we're happy to try it so they can see it. Because sometimes, we have a saying that authors sometimes don't know what they want until they see what they don't want.
Okay. Oh, that's a good way of looking at it. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's a great
so
one.
it's a back and forth process at times, and it's just using a model at the beginning and allowing the author to see how it's going to function. Because a lot of times, again, when it's in your head, you don't really have a great idea, but when it's before you, when you're looking at it, you go, okay, now I know what I like about this and what I don't like. And it's just back and forth until the author's pleased with what we're doing. If it's cover, back and forth until the cover's final. Now, if the layout, back and forth, we'll do about 20, 30 pages, back and forth until the author's happy with the template that we've created, and then we'll go do the rest of book. But having said that, we'll still go back to the author at the end of it and say, okay, this is the way the book looks. And the author might say, hey, can we change this picture? Can we move this? And all that sort of stuff. But we try and get as much of that as right as possible very early on. So there's less potential issues later. I mean, the things with layout, they're very much like dominoes. Once you've got it all set up, you can change one thing in the middle and everything from that point has the potential to change. Like if you had a picture in there and you've taken that picture out, everything is now jumping up by the space of that picture. So things that were set up really well on the next page have now totally moved. So that sort of stuff we try and get right really early. But yeah, having said that, like there's plenty of times the authors come up with, so can we include this picture or can we change this paragraph or can we do that at the end of the process? And, we've accommodated them. What we don't really want is people sort of going, you know what, I want a new chapter 10 and 11. I'm going to write in this whole new section. That's not the time to be doing it at the layout process. That's the time to be doing that would be the edit or prior to the edit.
Absolutely. So the process for me when we're going through it, so it's fantastic. So you've got your book written, you've got your pictures, you'll make your cover. We've got the editor going, the editor's on there. So you've got your forward, we write your forward, you write any dedications and all that, which I did, and then you go into the book which you're doing, which you and Kev designed.
Yep. And a lot of that, sorry to interrupt. I mean, a lot of
That's
that
all right.
is, yeah, you can, it doesn't, there's not a, like you can have a foreword, you can have a preface, you can have an introduction, you can do whatever you want. There's no rules to it. Like there's guides to it. Like you could have a dedication, you might not have a dedication. You might have an about the author page, you might not, acknowledgements, all that sort of thing. So while there's like suggestions about the way the book should look, it's still up to the author about whether they want these things or not in there. I've had authors who, for example, they want an about the author page, and then we have other authors like, I'll do an about the author page, but I don't want my picture in there. Or we just had authors like, no, don't even worry about the author page. So yeah, again, it's just sort of really up to the author to decide. We'll suggest what we think could be included. But at the end of the day, still the author's the boss. The author's the one who decides, yeah, I want this or I don't want this, or I want to do it totally differently.
I tell you what, I learned that I sort of had an idea of the process, and the process was back and forth to get it right. But I think the finishing process, when I spoke to you, I mean, God, I learned so much. It was get book reviews, putting the book
Yeah,
on, getting the book EPUB'd, to get it compatible to get onto Amazon, the Kindles type of things. I think it was I think it's KDF. I think it is KDF on
KDP.
KDP. There
Yeah,
you go, KDP on Amazon. Um, there's you got that one there. You've got the Booktopia and the way you do it. Because you want to talk a little bit about that because people are what people say. Go, okay, great, I've got this book. How? I mean, the first thing I said was, how do I get it onto certain places? But
yeah,
also, I think, which is very important, book reviews, my friend. So you look at
yeah.
book reviews, and I'll call it. What don't we say? Where to place it?
Yeah, I mean, the thing that a lot of authors have this misconception about is if they write a book and they publish it, that it'll just sell automatically. And, I get a lot of authors saying, how to get my book in the bookstore. And it's like, well, what are you expecting? And they're like, well, it'll sell. And it's like, have you gone in the bookstore? There's thousands of books in the bookstore. Why is your particular book going to be the one that's going to sell more than the others? I'm sure it's happened somewhere in the world. Some random book sold tons, but generally, it's any of the arts, books, movies, music, and like, it's a very saturated industry. There's tons of stuff out there. So it doesn't really happen that if you publish a book, it's just going to sell just because you published it. You need to create awareness for the book and you need to create awareness for yourself. You're a brand now. You're not just a person, you're a brand. And once you create awareness for yourself, then people will get interested in what you've done. Similar with the book. If you're creating awareness for the book, if you're doing social media, or if you're getting book reviews or whatever the case, then people are going to become aware that the book exists. And then they'll go find it, whether it's in the bookstore or online or whatever the case, go in the library. I always compare it to the movie industry. Like the new James Bond movie doesn't just drop and we go, hey, there's a new James Bond movie out. 6 months earlier, they'll do a teaser, then they'll do another teaser, then they'll do a trailer, then they'll do another trailer, then they'll get the actors out. So they're building up the hype over that period. So when the movie finally comes out, you're really buzzing to see it. Look at the Superman movie. It's coming out in July. They've been doing teasers and that for the last 4 or 5 months. So books are the same. In the lead up to the book getting published, do everything you can to create that awareness. So one, do social media. I know some people don't like social media. Unfortunately, it's become sort of like a necessary evil today. But do social media. Try and get the book reviewed. There's plenty. If you just Google book reviewers and then you place the genre of your book, if it's a mystery or a poetry collection or whatever the case, you'll find reviewers for it. So then you can hit up reviewers for it. Just understand that a lot of these reviewers, they're getting requests from a lot of people. So don't say, hey, my book's coming out on Saturday. Can you review it? They'll have a backlog of 10 books to read over the next 3 months. So you've got to jump into that queue really early. Things like podcasts like this. Find, podcasts that talk about writing. Find podcasts that talk about whatever genre that you've written. Um, Whatever you can do to create awareness for yourself in your book is always a good thing because once you actually get yourself out there, once people are aware that you exist, once people are aware that your work exists, then they go, you know what? I'm actually interested in that. I'm going to go buy it. And the thing too is if you think about every book that you've ever read, the the bulk of them probably you've read and picked them up because someone recommended it to you. Someone referred, said you should read this. Or you've seen some sort of review and they've said this is a great book about this, and you thought, I'm really interested in that topic. So you look for it. So you need to sort of generate this awareness around yourself and your book. And it's not really, it's not going to happen itself. Like I'm sure it's probably happened to some random but that's the exception. That's not the rule. And just
That's right.
understand it's a really competitive industry. Not trying to be negative about it, but just being realistic. It's not going to happen itself. You talk about like marketing. I mean, Matthew Riley, he self-published his first book, and I saw him speak at a library years and years ago. But he talked about sitting on the bus and holding his book up like he was reading it and making appreciative noises, um, just to like, make other people look at him and go, "Oh, he's reading a book. He's really enjoying it." So I'm not saying you should be that lateral or that, or do stuff like that, you pull stunts like that. But the reality is, you do need to think about how you're going to make people aware that you and your book exist. And don't just think about what people are doing today. Like I'm talking about social media and if you have your own website, that's all great. Think about what the next evolution is. Think about what people will be doing tomorrow. If you can get ahead of the trends, if you can be the one who sets the trends, you're going to be way ahead of people. So just constantly find ways to create awareness for yourself. Don't despair if things aren't happening quickly. Things don't happen immediately. Sometimes they don't happen for quite a while, but it does require perseverance. It does require you just constantly pushing yourself and your book.
Absolutely. I was just looking at some of the promotions that I did, like and I still do it. I use landing pages and I go full on
Yeah,
into actually, and it's not the book that you're really selling. You're really selling yourself, aren't you? Like,
yeah, yeah,
and I think that's the big thing. I mean, these are the words of yourself, but a lot of stuff there. I mean, I just learned about reviewers. I mean, I thought that was an amazing piece of information that you gave me. I'm going book reviews. Oh, right, okay. Because I mean, when you think about book reviews, book reviewers, they think they just review any, some of the bigger books.
yeah.
And I mean, even myself, I got a bestseller on Booktopia. I mean,
Oh,
that's
cool. Yeah,
it was a little great achievement, wasn't it? It's one of those small achievements that you can play on. You know what I mean? So it's something that you can work on. So social media is huge, and
yeah,
even doing boost on posts and stuff like that, and even promoting through Busybird. I mean, you guys had
yeah.
got the
Yeah.
videos and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of like Amazon ads used to work quite well. I've heard they're not quite as, I mean, they're still effective, but not quite as effective as they used to be because it's this thing that sort of like people were doing it, it was working well, and everyone jumped on it. So it dilutes it a little bit, but it's just thinking about what else can you do, you know, thinking about how, as you said, you're not selling your book, you're selling yourself. The book is an ambassador for you. It's an extension of you. So I'm sure there's plenty of people who've heard someone speak and they've said, "Oh, that's a really interesting person. What have they written?" And they've looked them up and thought, "Okay, I'm going to try one of their books." So it is a constant, for the want of a better term, it's a constant hustle.
Absolutely. See, I'm just looking at stuff now, as I said to you while we're doing it, just reminding myself of the great question, like book sirens you were telling me
Yeah,
about. That's a great one. So what? Okay, to finish off with that, that's great. So we got to. It's been a wonder. I've even learned more listening to you right now. This is what it's been fantastic. So you've given a good overview about people getting the ideas
yeah,
onto paper. That's probably the biggest thing that you've told us. I mean, people want a book where people, how did you write this book? I put pen to paper or I spoke in my way. And then, then we go and get, right, I have to get it edited. I have to go to a book publisher, which will be Busybird. You go straight to Busybird and talk to people. Talk to people like myself who have actually written a book or
yeah.
Konchevsky. What would you say as for the experience you've got, what would be the biggest takeaway with regards to obviously the money's got to be up there as well if you're going to put your money towards it.
Yeah.
But what do you think the biggest takeaway from being wanting to be an author of a book? It doesn't matter how successful. You just say, "I want to share my story." What's your biggest takeaway from your experience? What, nearly 40 years?
Okay, so I'll tell you about my own journey. Is like, I mean, I didn't publish until quite late, and a lot of I used to get really despondent.
Yep,
Um, And I went through this thing. It wasn't until my 40s that I just realized, why do I write? And I was thinking, like, obviously, so many people want the money, we want to acclaim, you want all that. That's the dream. But what I realized in myself is I wrote because I love telling stories. So the reason I wrote was because of my love of storytelling
yep,
and wanting to share that. Now, if I share that with one person or a million people, if I share it with one person, that's great. The one person gets it. Um, but the focus of that is actually I have to tell my stories whether one person reads it or 1 million people read it. I need to do it for myself. That's what my passion is in life, and I want to share those things. So I think everyone does have a story to tell. Some people have multiple stories to tell, but in the end, when you're writing, ask yourself, why am I doing this? Why am I really doing this? And I think the answer should come back to authenticity. It's something I'm doing
Absolutely. I think
because,
it's the biggest one. Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
and it's not some cynical grab or, posturing or anything like that. So we all want those material benefits at the end, but I found for myself, like, when I write, that's when I feel like I've realized my purpose in life, for the want of a better term.
I think the biggest thing is being authentic. As Blackie Lawler said, that the hardest thing is to be authentic, and you'll go to places that you really don't want to be, in a dark place to
Yep.
to get those answers. Les, it's been, as I said, I thank you so much for your time, but also your gracious knowledge that you gave me throughout, and Kev as well. I mean, I felt like I really did. I felt like I wanted to. I'm a perfectionist. This is the hardest thing.
Yep.
I was really, as my daughter said, she said that Dad's worked 5 years on this thing, and he wanted to get it right. And I really want to thank you so on this podcast. Say thank you so much
You're welcome.
for everything that you and Kev did.
Yeah, I mean the thing too is you've worked 5 years on the actual book, but I mean it's still a lifetime of experiences that pointed at that moment that you had to write. And to talk about the authenticity, to use a pro wrestling analogy, you look at the guys who make it really big, and it's the guys who just are really being themselves and blowing it up.
That's,
When they do these stupid gimmicks, they don't really get anywhere. It's always the guys who ultimately just become themselves but amp up the volume. So it's finding that truth in yourself and then working to share that with others.
absolutely, mate. As I said, it's I'm very proud of what I've done, and I'm very proud to know yourself. And thank you so much for what you did. Now, do you want to give Busybird a little bit of a plug for the end, my friend? Tell us where they can find you online. I know you're doing books all around the world, and
Yep.
I can't
So
recommend you more highly.
So find Busybird, www.busybird.com.au. Busybird is always the one word. We're in Montmorency. We have a creative little hub out there. We are on social media. We're on Facebook. We're on Instagram. We're on TikTok. All those sort of places. Feel free to contact us and have a chat about what your project is.
What's the best way they can contact you, my friend? Should they go on to?
Give us a call, or email us on admin@busybird.com.au. Everything's obligation free. We're not going to come hound you, if you have a conversation and think, okay, I don't want to do this or whatever the case. That actually frustrates us when we hear about people who suffer that sort of harassment. But, we're always free to have a chat. Drop
Absolutely.
in, you can have a coffee, you can meet a Labrador Oscar. You know,
That's a great thing.
yeah, so he's very friendly. Meet Kev, who runs the business. We are the sort of business that, authors do just drop in. They just have a coffee. They come in, they bring Oscar treats. They just hang out for a little bit and just talk to us. And that's the thing that Kev's wife Blaze really fostered. It was this creative community that people could feel comfortable in. They could come and just relax and chat with like-minded people.
Mate, it's been an absolute pleasure. I'm going to have you back on soon, but I think the information you've given us today was amazing. And I always send off every chat that I have with people with the quote from Bret the Hitman Hart. Now, I'm going to let you say it because you are a wrestling fan.
Yep.
You know what Bret says. I've got it in my book. Les, over to you to finish off this chat with us.
Now, me being the best there was, the best there is, the best there ever will be. That one.
That's the one. The best there is, the best there was, and the best there ever will be. Hey, I'm sending this straight to Bret. As I said, Les, thank you so much for your
Thanks
time.
for having me on.
Oh, mate, he's a stoic individual, and I was very proud to actually meet him, and it's proud to have him in the book as well. So,
I've watched a lot of interviews with him. He's really, I don't think he gets enough credit for his sense of humor. He's got this really dry sense of humor. It's really cool.
He
Yeah.
has, he has, and there's one. Look, I'd love nothing to more than to interview Brett one day. You never know what might happen. But
Yeah.
ladies and gentlemen, this has been a chat with Jay, with Les from Busybird Publishing, talking about publishing a book. And I think it's very important to get it out there. One of the best in the world, if not the best in the world, in my opinion.
Thank you.
I'm biased. I don't care. I don't give a crap. That's the way I talk. So, but yeah, it's something to get your story out and leave a legacy. So on that note, we've already said goodbye the way we're supposed to. This has been a chat with Jay. If you want to have a chat with us, you can DM us downstairs, send us an email, whatwarriorhealth@gmail.com. Come have a chat. Books online, Booktopia, Fish Pond, Amazon. Just type in Journey of a Whitefeather, and I'll even sign one for you if you send me a direct message. Thank you so much, Les, and we look forward to seeing you on the next episode of A Chat with Jay. And always be your best self. Be limitless, and write your book. Remove your mask. Write your story. Take care, guys. See you soon.